I was pouring coffee alone in my kitchen on a quiet Wednesday morning when the phone rang. Sir, this is your bank's fraud department. Did you apply for a $45,000 loan 3 weeks ago? My hand froze around the mug. No, I never applied for any loan. She lowered her voice. Someone changed your security alerts and opened several accounts in your name. Just then my son walked in, smiling. Everything okay, Dad? I smiled back. Perfectly fine. I'm grateful you're here with me today. Before we begin, leave a quick comment below. Have you ever had to choose between protecting yourself and someone you love? Yes or no? Your perspective might be exactly what someone else needs to read. A quick note. Some details in this story are fictionalized for reflection and impact. What I hope you take away is the deeper lesson. The bank representative asked me to verify a $45,000 loan I'd never applied for, and in that moment, I knew my son had already decided I had to go. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start from the beginning. My name is Vernon Garrett, 60 years old, and for 32 years, I built a construction materials business from the ground up in Charlotte before selling it 3 years ago to a regional competitor for enough money to retire comfortably. My wife Ruth had passed away 6 years earlier on a cold February morning in the bedroom we'd shared for 43 years, and her photograph still watched over me from the fireplace mantel. 6 years is a long time to live alone in a 4-bedroom house on Elmwood Drive. I still made coffee for two out of habit some mornings before catching myself staring at the empty cup I'd set out. For a woman who would never drink from it again, the house had been too big and too quiet for just one old man rattling around inside it, and some days I'd go hours without hearing my own voice. Ruth's photograph sat on the mantel above the fireplace we'd installed in 1995, back when Desmond was still in high school, and the house felt full of life and possibility. In the photo, she's laughing at something I'd said, her eyes crinkled at the corners the way they always did when she was truly happy. I talked to that photograph more than I care to admit. It was October when my son called, with what sounded at the time like the kindest offer anyone had made me in years. Dad, you shouldn't be alone in that big house, Desmond said over the phone that Sunday afternoon. Why don't Celine and I move in for a while? We could help you out, keep you company, and save up for our own place at the same time. My son Desmond, 34, worked as a real estate agent in Charlotte, though I didn't yet know he was drowning in debt from a failed investment 2 years prior. I said yes before he even finished the sentence. The relief that flooded through me was almost embarrassing. I hadn't realized how desperately lonely I'd become until someone offered to fill the silence. We'll save up for our own place, Dad, Desmond said. Just a few months. 3 weeks later, they pulled up in a rental truck on a crisp autumn Saturday. Desmond's wife, Celine, 32, had worked for 8 years in the credit department at a major Charlotte bank, a detail that would later prove devastatingly significant. She smiled as she carried boxes up to the spare bedrooms, upstairs the ones Ruth and I had always hoped would someday hold grandchildren. For the first few weeks, it felt like a genuine blessing. Celine cooked dinner every night, pot roast on Tuesdays, chicken and rice on Thursdays, meals that filled the house with smells I hadn't experienced since Ruth died. Her pot roast reminded me of Ruth's, and I told her so. She smiled and squeezed my hand. Desmond fixed the gutters without me asking, mowed the lawn on Saturday mornings, sat with me to watch football on Sunday afternoons, the way we used to when he was a boy. The house didn't feel so empty anymore. I could hear them moving around upstairs in the evenings, their voices a comforting reminder that I wasn't completely alone in the world. How do you measure the exact moment? Trust becomes stupidity. I told my neighbor Lawrence I was the luckiest old man in Charlotte. Lawrence Hampton, 68, lived directly across the street, a retired Charlotte police officer who spent 30 years reading people and never forgot how. He stood at the fence line between our yards one afternoon while I was checking the mail, his weathered hands resting on the top rail. That's good, Vernon, Lawrence said, nodding slowly. Real good. Lawrence nodded, but said nothing more. He'd noticed things I hadn't yet. I would learn later that he'd seen Celine standing at the kitchen window multiple times, watching the mailbox with an intensity that seemed odd for someone just living in a house temporarily. But Lawrence was the kind of man who observed everything and commented on very little. The dinners continued. Celine's smile never wavered. Desmond kept fixing things around the house, kept telling me stories about difficult clients and successful closings. Every evening I'd sit in my recliner, thinking about how grateful I was to have family around me again, how Ruth would have loved seeing our son taking such good care of me. What I didn't know, what I couldn't have known not until the bank's system logs laid it out for Adrian months later, was what happened during the first week they moved in. I'd taken a nap one Tuesday afternoon, exhausted from helping them unpack boxes. While I slept upstairs, Celine stood alone in my kitchen. The electric bill sat on the counter where I'd left it, next to the mortgage statement I'd already paid, and the bank notice about my savings account, interest. The logs would later show Celine pulled out her phone that afternoon. She didn't pick up the papers, didn't need to. 8 years working in a bank's credit department had taught her exactly what information she needed and how to extract it without leaving evidence. She photographed the account numbers, the routing numbers, the full name and address at the top of each statement. She knew which numbers opened which doors. She knew how identity theft worked because she'd seen it investigated dozens of times. She knew the patterns, the methods, the vulnerabilities in the system that most people never even considered. Ruth's photograph watched from the mantel as her son's wife stole her husband's future one account number at a time. I woke from my nap to the smell of dinner cooking. Came downstairs to find Celine humming in the kitchen, setting the table for 3. The electric bill was exactly where I'd left it. Nothing looked disturbed. Nothing felt wrong. "Hope you're hungry," Celine said, smiling. "I made your favorite." I didn't know that during that very first week, Celine, who had worked 8 years in the bank's credit department, had already memorized every account number from the electric bill I left on the kitchen counter. The woman cooking pot roast in my kitchen wasn't just playing house. She was building a file. That file Celine was building didn't stay theoretical for long. When I tried to log into my bank account on a Tuesday in January and the password wouldn't work, my son told me the bank resets them automatically now, and I believed him. But I'm getting ahead of myself again. The changes started small, the way poison works so gradual, you don't notice until it's already deep in your system. It was a Monday morning in December when Celine made her first move. I was pouring my second cup of coffee when she appeared in the kitchen doorway, already dressed for work, that same warm smile she'd worn since moving in. "Let me grab the mail for you from now on, Dad," she said, picking up her car keys. "You tend to forget sometimes, and I'm passing the box anyway on my way out." I looked up from my coffee surprised. "I don't forget the mail." "Well, just to make things easier then," she said, already moving toward the door. "One less thing for you to think about." "You two are making my life easier," I said, meaning it. "Ruth would have loved having you here." Soline's smile didn't waver. That afternoon, Desmond made his own offer. "I can handle your online bill payments too, Dad," he said, settling onto the couch beside me during a commercial break. "It's much faster than writing checks. I do it for all my clients' properties." "I've been writing checks for 40 years, I said. "I know, and that's fine. But this way you don't have to worry about stamps, or whether the payment gets there on time. Everything's automatic." He pulled out his phone to show me. "See, you just click here, enter the amount, and it's done." I agreed because it made sense. Because my son was a real estate professional who handled property payments every day. Because refusing would have seemed stubborn and old-fashioned, and I didn't want to be that kind of father. What I didn't know was that across the street, Lawrence Hampton was watching. That same week, Lawrence stood at his living room window, the same window where he'd stood for 30 years, as a cop watching the neighborhood reading patterns most people never noticed. He saw Desmond walk to our mailbox around 2 in the afternoon when I was usually napping. Desmond pulled out a stack of envelopes, flipped through them, stopped at one. A bank envelope. Lawrence watched him open it, carefully pull out the statement, hold it flat while he photographed it with his phone. Then Desmond slid the statement back into the envelope, sealed it with his thumb, and brought the mail inside like nothing had happened. Lawrence came over that evening, stood at my porch with his hands in his jacket pockets. "Everything going well with Desmond and Celine living here?" He asked, his tone casual, but his eyes sharp. "They're angels, Lawrence," I said. "My son is even helping me with all the paperwork I don't understand. The online stuff, you know how it is." "That's good, Vernon," Lawrence said slowly. "Real good." He didn't say what he'd seen, didn't accuse my son of anything. Just nodded and went home. Lawrence was the kind of man who collected information before acting, who understood that sometimes telling someone the truth only makes them defend the lie harder. When does helping become stealing? When does convenience become control? I didn't know the answer yet because I hadn't asked the question. 3 weeks later in January, I noticed I hadn't received a bank statement in almost a month. "Where's my bank statement?" I asked Desmond over breakfast. "I haven't seen one in weeks." "Oh, they automatically switched you to e-statements, Dad," he said without looking up from his phone. "More secure that way. Everything's paperless now." "They didn't ask me first. They send an email notification. You probably just missed it." He took a bite of toast. "It's better anyway. Saves trees." I let it go. That evening, I decided to check my account balance online, something I did maybe once a month, just to make sure everything looked right. I pulled up the bank's website on my phone, typed in my username, entered my password. Incorrect password. I tried again more carefully this time, making sure each letter and number was exact. Incorrect password. Third time, same result. A small flutter of panic started in my chest, not because of the password, but because I suddenly couldn't remember the last time I'd successfully logged in. Had it been that long? "My password isn't working," I said to Desmond, who was sitting across the living room. "I've tried it 3 times. He looked up concerned. "The bank resets them periodically now, Dad. Security thing. Let me fix it for you." I handed him my phone, grateful. He studied the screen for a moment, then called toward the stairs. "Celine, what's Dad's password reset process?" From the bedroom upstairs, Celine's voice came back muffled but clear enough. I couldn't quite make out the words, but Desmond nodded as if he could hear her perfectly. "Okay, I got it," he said. His thumbs moved across my phone screen fast and confident. "They changed their verification system. I'm updating your email and security phone number so you'll get the alerts." "I thought my email was fine," I said. "They need a mobile-optimized one now. I'm just putting in a secondary email that forwards to yours." More typing. "And the phone number for the text codes. They need a smartphone number, not a landline." I watched him work, understanding maybe 1 word in 3. Smartphone numbers, verification codes, mobile-optimized emails. It was a language I'd never fully learned, and I'd stopped trying years ago. "There," Desmond said, handing back my phone. "All set. Try logging in now." I did. The password he'd created worked perfectly. My account balance appeared on the screen exactly where it should be. "Thank you," I said. "Anytime, Dad. Ruth used to say you can tell a person's character by what they do when no one's watching." Turned out my son's wife was watching everything, and I was watching nothing. That night, after I'd gone upstairs to bed, Desmond sat in the living room with his phone, or so the phone records Adrienne pulled later would show. Celine came down in her bathrobe, poured a glass of water, stood beside him. He typed out a text message and showed her the screen. She read it, nodded, and he hit send. The record showed exactly what the message said, sent to Celine's phone. "Done. All online alerts are ours." I slept soundly that night, the same way I'd slept for 60 years, with a clear conscience and no enemies. Meanwhile, 1 floor below me, my son was unlocking the door to my entire financial life, and the person holding the real key was his wife, whispering instructions from a bedroom in my own house. Having all my alerts redirected meant Desmond and Celine could do whatever they wanted with my accounts, and I'd never know until it was too late. My phone rang at 9:30 on a Wednesday morning in February, and by the time I hung up 2 minutes later, I knew my son was stealing from me. I was drinking my second cup of coffee in the kitchen alone in the house Desmond and Celine had both left for work an hour earlier. The phone showed a number I didn't recognize, but it was local Charlotte area code. "Mr. Garrett," a woman's voice, professional and careful. "This is Rebecca Thornton. I'm a verification specialist from the bank's fraud prevention department." "Yes," I said, already feeling my stomach tighten. "I'm calling to verify an unsecured personal loan of $45,000, approved in your name 3 weeks ago. Can you confirm you applied for this loan?" The kitchen went very quiet. I could hear the refrigerator humming, the clock ticking on the wall, my own breath. "I never applied for any loan," I said. "I see." A pause. I heard keys clicking on her end. "Mr. Garrett, the application was submitted online with your complete social security number, date of birth, and home address. Everything matches our records perfectly." "That's impossible. I didn't apply for anything." "I understand this is concerning," she said. "Let me ask you, have you given anyone access to your online banking recently? A family member, perhaps?" My hand tightened on the phone. "My son helps me with the online stuff sometimes. The passwords, the bill payments. I see, she said again, and something in her tone made my blood run cold. I had to ask, even though part of me didn't want to know the answer. What phone number do the alerts go to for this loan? More typing. The online alert number registered is 704-555-0847. I've never seen that number in my life. That's different from how I reached you, she said. I'm calling the primary account phone number we have on file from when you first opened the account in 2009. That number hasn't been changed, but the online alert system uses a different field. In our database, someone updated that number about 6 weeks ago through the online portal. 6 weeks ago, right after Desmond had fixed my password. Mr. Garrett, I'm going to flag this loan for investigation, Rebecca Thornton said. I'd recommend you come into a branch in person and request a complete review of your accounts. Don't use online banking until this is resolved. Thank you, I managed to say. I hung up and sat at the kitchen table for what felt like an hour but was probably only 2 minutes. My hands were shaking. I pulled out my wallet, counted the cards inside with fingers that didn't feel like my own. 2 cards. The same 2 I'd carried for years. Nothing new, nothing I didn't recognize. But apparently, that didn't matter anymore. They didn't need physical cards. They had something better, complete access to everything granted by my own hand when I'd been stupid enough to trust them. $45,000. 3 weeks ago, my own son. My coffee had gone cold. I could hear the house settling around me, those familiar creaks and sighs I'd known for decades. My heart pounded so loud, I was certain Celine could hear it. From wherever she was certain, somehow, she knew I'd just discovered what they'd done. But I didn't call Desmond. Didn't text him asking what the hell he'd done. Some instinct from 32 years of running a business kicked in, the same instinct that had kept me alive in negotiations with contractors who tried to cheat me with suppliers, who inflated their invoices with competitors who smiled to my face and undercut me behind my back. Gather information first, understand the full scope, then act. I spent the day replaying every moment since October. Celine offering to collect the mail. Desmond taking over my bill payments. The password that suddenly stopped working. The e-statements I'd never requested. Each memory that had seemed helpful and kind took on a new shape, like looking at a familiar object in different light and realizing it had been something else all along. At noon, Celine came downstairs in her work clothes, heading for the kitchen. "Good morning, Dad," she said brightly, coffee still warm. "Made a fresh pot an hour ago," I said, my voice steady. "Help yourself." She poured a cup, added cream, stirred it slowly. I watched her hand on the spoon, the same hand that had photographed my account numbers that first week. "You seem quiet today," she said, looking at me over the rim of her mug. "Everything okay?" "Fine," I said. "Just thinking." "Well, don't think too hard," she said with a smile. "That's what Desmond and I are here for." She left for work 20 minutes later. I sat in my chair and didn't move for another hour. That evening, Desmond came home right at 6, the way he always did. He kissed Celine in the kitchen, asked about her day, then came into the dining room where I was already sitting. "How was your day, Dad?" he asked, pulling out his chair. "Quiet," I said. "Watched some TV. How about you?" "Crazy day at the office," he said, and launched into a story about a buyer who wanted to back out of a deal at the last minute, how he'd convinced them to stay, how he'd saved the commission. He was animated, gesturing with his fork, laughing at his own cleverness. I ate Celine's chicken, nodded at the right moments, asked follow-up questions. 32 years of reading people who lied to my face about delivery dates and material costs had taught me how to keep my face calm while my mind worked through every angle. Ruth used to tell me I was too trusting. I'd tell her trust was a virtue. Sitting there watching my son lie to my face about his day, I finally understood what she'd been trying to warn me about. I didn't say a word to Desmond that night about the phone call. I just watched him eat dinner, laugh, ask me how my day was, tell me about some buyer who almost walked away from a deal. I watched and wondered how many other things I'd missed and how many I was about to discover. 2 days later, I drove to a bank branch downtown, walked past the ATM machines to a human teller, and asked for something my son couldn't delete paper. James Whitfield. The teller at the downtown branch looked about 40 with graying temples and the patient demeanor of someone who'd processed thousands of unusual requests. When I explained I needed complete transaction histories for all accounts in my name, checking savings, credit loans, everything printed and certified, he didn't blink. "We can absolutely do that, Mr. Garrett," he said. It'll take about 20 minutes to pull everything together. Would you like to wait, or should I call you when it's ready? I'll wait. I sat in a vinyl chair near the window and watched traffic pass on Trade Street. A delivery truck double parked. A woman in a business suit checked her phone at the crosswalk. Normal Friday morning activity in Charlotte, while my life quietly fell apart in a banker's printer. James called me back to the counter 18 minutes later with a manila folder thick as my thumb. Everything's here, he said. Checking and savings go back 6 months as requested. I also found 3 credit card accounts and 2 personal loans opened in the last 90 days. 3 credit cards, 2 loans. I already knew about one loan, the $45,000 Rebecca Thornton had called about. My hands felt steadier than they should have as I opened the folder. The first card opened January 19th. Credit limit $28,000, current balance $6,200. The second card opened January 26th. Credit limit $30,000, current balance $8,900. The third card opened February 3rd, credit limit $20,000, current balance $2,400. Total credit limit $78,000. Total balance is $17,500. Add the $45,000 loan Rebecca mentioned, and I was looking at $62,500 in fraudulent debt already on the books. The second loan, $37,000 approved February 10th. Funds disbursed yesterday brought the total to $99,500. Nearly $100,000 in 3 months. Mr. Garrett. James's voice came from somewhere far away. Are you all right? Can I get you some water? I'm fine. My voice sounded normal. Thank you for pulling this together. I walked to my car, set the folder on the passenger seat, and sat with my hands on the steering wheel for 5 full minutes before I could trust myself to drive. Then I called Adrienne Mercer. Adrienne Mercer, 52, ran an elder law practice from a 3rd-floor office in downtown Charlotte, recommended to me a decade ago by a business associate who said she was the sharpest attorney he'd ever met. Ruth and I had used her for our estate planning. She'd handled Ruth's will. She knew our family history. She answered on the second ring. Vernon, she said, it's been too long. How are you holding up? I need to see you, I said, as soon as possible. It's about Desmond. Her tone shifted immediately. Does Monday morning work, 9 o'clock? I'll be there. I drove home, put the folder in my bedroom closet behind a box of Ruth's sweaters. I still couldn't bring myself to donate and went downstairs to make lunch, like nothing had happened. Desmond came home around 2. Celine appeared from the guest room 20 minutes later. We ate turkey sandwiches at the kitchen table while they told me about their morning errands. Grocery shopping, normal married couple tasks. I nodded and asked about the weather and wondered how much more they were planning. The answer came 1 week later at 11:30 on a Thursday night. I couldn't sleep. My mind kept circling back to those documents. The balances growing, the timeline accelerating. I got up to use the bathroom and heard Desmond's voice through his bedroom door, low, urgent, excited. I should have kept walking. I should have gone back to my room. Instead, I stood in the hallway in my pajamas and listened to my son destroy what was left of my trust. Told you it's working perfectly, Desmond was saying. The second loan just cleared. That puts us at exactly what we calculated. A pause. He must have been on the phone. Oh, 160 total, he continued. 3 cards max, 2 loans processed, everything in his name. When we hit him with the debt consolidation conversation next month, he'll panic. Old guy fixed income, $160,000 in sudden debt he can't possibly service, he'll have to sell. Another pause. The house appraises at $890, maybe $900 if we're lucky. Mortgage is paid off. That was the whole point of waiting for Dad to croak. Remember, no bank in the picture. We forced the sale pocket, the full amount, split it, and I'm in Atlanta by summer. My hand found the wall. The hallway tilted slightly. Celine, baby, relax. He trusts me completely. He's not going to figure it out until we're ready to tell him, and by then the debt's already locked in. His signature, his credit, his problem. We're just helping him solve it. Laughter. My son laughed. Love you too. See you this weekend. I made it back to my bedroom before my legs gave out. I sat on the edge of the bed Ruth and I had shared for 43 years and stared at her photograph on the nightstand. $160,000 in fraudulent debt. Forced the sale of our home. Split the proceeds. Moved to Atlanta. Our home, the house where we'd raised Desmond, where Ruth had planted azaleas every spring, where I'd carried her over the threshold in 1980 and held her hand in hospice 43 years later. I picked up Ruth's photograph, the one from our 30th anniversary, her smile bright and real and permanent. "I won't let us lose our home," I whispered to the glass, "and I won't scream. I will do this the right way, my way." Monday morning couldn't come fast enough. Monday morning I sat across from Adrienne Mercer and told her what I'd heard through my son's bedroom door, and she told me exactly how many years of federal prison he was facing. Her third-floor office overlooked Trade Street, floor-to-ceiling windows, letting in February sunlight that felt too bright for the conversation we were having. She'd pulled out a yellow legal pad the moment I sat down, pen-ready face, professionally neutral. I recounted Thursday night word for word, the phone call, Celine's name, the numbers. He said the 2 loans and the maxed cards put us at exactly $160,000, I told her. He said once the debt was high enough, no one would doubt I had to sell the house to pay it off. Adrienne wrote without looking up. "What else?" He said it would be entirely my own decision. I paused, meaning mine. He's going to present it like he's helping me solve a problem he created. And the timeline, he mentioned Atlanta, said he'd be there by summer. She set down her pen and pulled a manila folder from her desk drawer, thick-tabbed, organized. "I've been working on this since you called Friday. I reached out to a private investigator and an old contact in the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit over the weekend. What you've given me today confirms what I've already found." She opened the folder and turned it toward me. The first page showed surveillance photographs, ATM machines, timestamps a man in a gray jacket withdrawing cash. I recognized my son's profile in 3 different images, 3 different banks, 3 different dates in January. "This is ATM footage from 3 different banks," Adrienne said. "That's Desmond withdrawing cash from credit cards opened in your name, the cards you discovered at the bank branch." She flipped to the next section, spreadsheets, IP addresses, loan application timestamps. "These loan applications were submitted from your home internet connection," she continued. "Your IP address, your router, your house. The applications were filed while you were documented elsewhere. I cross-referenced with the receipts you provided from your grocery trips and doctor's appointments." I stared at the timestamps. January 19th, 10:47 a.m. I'd been at the cardiologist. January 26th, 2:33 p.m. grocery store buying chicken and rice. Adrienne turned to the final tab. Bank system logs, access records, Celine's employee ID highlighted in yellow. "Celine accessed your social security number 8 separate times through her bank's internal system," Adrienne said quietly. "She pulled your full credit report, your account histories, your tax information. Every access is logged. Every access is illegal under the Graham-Leach-Bliley Act." She folded her hands on top of the folder. "What you're describing is 3 separate federal crimes. Vernon, identity theft under Title 18. Bank fraud, wire fraud. Aggravated identity theft alone carries a mandatory minimum of 2 years on top of whatever the fraud charges add. They're looking at serious prison time. 32 years running a business taught me to separate emotion from strategy. Sitting there looking at surveillance footage of my own son stealing from me, I finally understood why. "What do I need to do?" I asked. Adrienne leaned back in her chair. "Go home. Act normal. Don't confront them. Don't change your routine. Don't give them any reason to suspect, you know. Every conversation you have with them from this point forward, I need to hear about it. Every detail. How long? Until they make their next move. The moment they file another loan application or try to pressure you about the debt, we'll know the scheme is complete. Then we move." I drove home and became the man my son expected to see. For 3 weeks I ate dinners at the kitchen table and laughed at Desmond's stories about difficult clients at the real estate office. I asked Celine about her day at the bank, nodded sympathetically when she complained about difficult customers. I watched television in the living room while they went upstairs early, their bedroom door closing with a soft click that used to mean privacy and now meant conspiracy. One Tuesday morning, Celine sat across from me at breakfast coffee, steaming between us, and cast her line. "Our house must be worth nearly $1 million now, right?" "Dad," she said it casually, like making conversation, "the market's been crazy." I buttered my toast, took a bite, swallowed. "Market's doing well from what I hear. Prices keep climbing. Have you thought about what you'd do if you ever had to sell?" "Can't say I have." I met her eyes over my coffee cup. "This is home. Ruth and I built our lives here. She smiled warm, sympathetic false. Of course. I was just curious. Across the table, Desmond caught her eye. A look passed between them. Satisfaction, progress, soon. That night I called Adrienne from my bedroom door. Locked voice, barely above a whisper. She asked about the house value today. I said, fishing. Desmond was watching. Good. Adrienne's voice was calm, certain. They're setting up the conversation, getting you used to thinking about the house as an asset instead of a home. How much longer? Not long. Stay the course. Across the street, Lawrence Hampton waved to me each morning when I collected the newspaper. I waved back, smiled, commented on the weather. He was retired police, 30 years with Charlotte PD, and something in his eyes told me he saw more than I wanted him to. But he never asked, and I never offered. I was a man playing checkers while living with people who thought they were playing chess. They didn't know I'd already learned both games and moved on to something they'd never seen coming. 3 weeks after my Monday meeting with Adrienne, their voices carried through the wall. We shared muffled, but distinct enough. One more loan, Celine said, and they'd be set. Next week, Desmond answered, confident, final. Then they'd start the pressure. I pulled my phone from the nightstand, opened my messages to Adrienne, typed 2 words in the darkness. Next week. 3 dots appeared immediately. She was awake too, waiting. Her reply came 5 seconds later, understood. I set the phone down, turned off the bedside lamp, and lay back against the pillow. The ceiling disappeared into shadow. Somewhere in the darkness, my son was planning his final theft, counting days, until he could force me out of my own home. He didn't know that 3 weeks ago Adrienne had already introduced me to someone who could make a house disappear. 3 weeks after Adrienne handed me that business card, I sat in a cafe 8 miles from my house, paid cash for 2 coffees, and met the woman who would help me make my home disappear. Belinda Frost, 45, operated a boutique real estate firm specializing in discreet sales for clients who valued privacy above all else. And Adrienne promised me she was the best in Charlotte at making properties move quietly. She arrived exactly on time. No briefcase, no laptop, just a leather portfolio, and the kind of calm competence that comes from handling situations most realtors never see. I slid her coffee across the table. She didn't touch it. Adrienne briefed me, Belinda said. You need to sell without your son's knowledge. How quickly? As soon as possible, I said. But completely private. No Zillow, no Realtor.com, nothing public. Understood. She pulled a single page from her portfolio. Market analysis, comparable sales, projected value range. Based on current comps in your neighborhood, I'd estimate 885 to 910,000. The market's strong. I can list it through my professional network. Only builders, investors, private buyers who value discretion. I looked at the numbers Ruth and I had built over 43 years, reduced to a price range on paper. When can we start? Today, Belinda said. I'll need access for photos and staging evaluation. Can you arrange a time when the house is empty? I'll make it work. She finally picked up her coffee. Mr. Garrett, I've handled situations like this before. People think real estate is always public. It isn't. The right buyer will find us. That afternoon I drove to a credit union in a neighboring town Desmond never visited. The lobby was quiet, wood-paneled. Nothing like the modern bank where Celine worked and monitored every transaction I made. I opened a new checking account, requested a private P.O. box for the mailing address, updated my contact information with Social Security and my pension administrator, rerouting statements away from Elmwood Drive. This account existed completely outside Desmond and Celine's reach. No alerts to their phones, no emails they could intercept, no digital footprint they could access. For the first time in months, I controlled something they couldn't see. The account officer handed me temporary checks and a debit card. Everything stays completely separate from your other accounts, I asked. Completely, she confirmed. Nothing from this account will go to your home address. All statements to the P.O. box. I thanked her and walked out into afternoon sunlight that felt different than it had that morning. Lighter, maybe, or just less suffocating. Desmond thought he was building a trap. He didn't know I was building a bigger one around his. 2 days later, on Adrienne's recommendation, I signed up for a credit monitoring service that sent instant alerts for any new account opened under my Social Security number. The setup took 10 minutes on my laptop while Desmond and Celine were at work. Desmond had no idea such services existed. He thought fraud happened in darkness invisible until the bills arrived. He didn't know technology had caught up to thieves like him. I carried my phone everywhere after that. Kitchen, bedroom, bathroom, yard, waiting for the notification I knew was coming. Adrian had told me on our last call, when that second loan hits, we'll have everything we need for the FBI. Complete pattern final evidence case closed. Before I show you the alert that changed everything, are you still with me? Comment A if you think Vernon catches them in time, or B if Desmond escapes. Add one short reason why. Please note, some details ahead are adapted for dramatic storytelling, though the lesson behind them remains true. If fictionalized elements aren't for you, you can stop here. Friday morning the following week, my phone buzzed while I was reading the newspaper at the kitchen table. Credit alert. New personal loan $37,000 opened in my name 14 minutes ago. I stared at the screen. The room went silent except for the hum of the refrigerator. 3 credit cards with combined limits of $78,000. First loan, $45,000. Second loan, $37,000. Total $160,000. Exactly the number Desmond had said through the bedroom wall. 2 loans and 3 maxed cards totaling $160,000. Every word he'd spoken had been true. Every prediction accurate. Every theft calculated. I called Adrian from my car in the driveway, engine running for privacy. It happened, I said when she answered. Second loan just came through. How much? $37,000. Total is $160,000 now. Exactly what he said. I heard papers rustling on her end. I'm calling the FBI Charlotte field office today. We have everything original bank records. 3 unauthorized credit cards. ATM surveillance footage. IP address proof. Celine's 8 illegal system accesses. Now the complete pattern with your credit monitoring alerts. How long until they move? The agent I've been working with said to let you finalize the house sale first. Once the property's transferred and proceeds are secured in your name, they'll execute. Federal charges: identity theft, bank fraud, wire fraud, all documented. I sat in my car watching my house, the azaleas Ruth planted the porch. Where we'd watched Desmond learn to ride a bike, the windows that had framed 43 years of ordinary life. What about Belinda? I asked, my voice steady even as my heart pounded. Adrian paused for exactly 2 seconds. Belinda messaged me this morning, she said. We have an offer. Ruth always said patience was my greatest strength. Sitting there with complete federal evidence against my own son, I finally understood what she meant and what it would cost me. How much? I asked. $890,000, cash. Buyers are ready to close in 2 weeks. I closed my eyes. 43 years, $890,000. 2 weeks. Tell her yes, I said. That afternoon, Adrian called again. The FBI file was submitted. Special Agent Marcus Reeves confirmed a formal investigation was open. 3 separate federal charges. Timeline: wait for Vernon's house sale to complete. Then move on Desmond and Celine simultaneously. Everything was in motion. The trap was set. All I had to do was wait for my son to walk into the cage he'd built for himself. 2 weeks until closing. 2 weeks until Desmond discovered the house he planned to steal was already gone. 2 weeks until the FBI knocked on his door. I went inside and made dinner like nothing had changed. 9 days after Belinda listed my house to her private network, a young couple expecting their first child offered $890,000 in cash. And that same evening, my son told me he was leaving town for 5 days. Belinda called Friday afternoon asking me to meet at our usual cafe. When I arrived, her leather portfolio was already open on the table. Griffin and Alara Ashford, she said. Young couple, first baby on the way. They're offering $890,000 all cash. I set down my coffee. No contingencies, Vernon. They can close whenever you're ready. Griffin Ashford, 29, and his wife Alara, were expecting their first child and had fallen in love with the house's large backyard the moment they saw it, seeing not what it was, but what it would become for their growing family. Where do I sign? I asked. She slid the acceptance document across the table. My hand was steady, the same hand that had signed business contracts for 32 years, that had held Ruth's in the hospital, that had helped Desmond learn to write his name. The house was sold. That evening I made spaghetti for dinner. Desmond and Celine came downstairs at 6:30 like always. Halfway through the meal, Desmond set down his fork. Company's sending us to Atlanta for a conference, he said. 5 days starting Sunday morning. I looked up from my plate. That's good, son. You and Selene enjoy yourselves. We'll be back Friday evening, Desmond said. You'll be okay here alone, Dad. I've been taking care of myself a long time, I said. I'll be fine. Across the table, Desmond caught Celine's eye. Some private communication passed between them. 5 days away, while I sat alone, none the wiser about the debt they'd manufactured, the pressure campaign they were planning. Except the house they were planning to force me to sell was already gone, and the debt they thought would break me was documented evidence in an FBI file. 5 days. A window I couldn't have planned better myself. Sunday morning, I waved goodbye as they loaded their suitcases. Desmond hugged me, told me to call if I needed anything, drove away smiling. Tuesday morning, I sat in a title company conference room signing closing documents across from two people I'd never met but already felt grateful for. Alara, 28 and 7 months pregnant, rested her hand on her round belly as she signed each page of the closing documents, already imagining her daughter's first steps across that backyard grass. Griffin beamed beside her, checking each page with careful attention. "Congratulations on the baby," I said when we finished. "That backyard will be perfect for a little one." Alara's face lit up. "We can already picture our daughter playing out there." "Thank you for selling to us, Mr. Garrett," Griffin said, shaking my hand. "This house is exactly what we dreamed of. 43 years in this house. 43 years of marriage, of business, of raising a son who would try to steal it all. And now it was gone in an afternoon." The title officer confirmed the wire transfer. $890,000 deposited into my secret credit union account. The account Desmond and Selene didn't know existed money they would never touch. I shook their hands again, wished them every happiness, walked out. Into March sunlight, a man who no longer owned the home where his wife had died. Tuesday afternoon, I returned to Elmwood Drive with 2 pre-hired movers. I took only what mattered: Ruth's photograph from the mantel, her reading chair from the bedroom, my father's wall clock that had hung in the hallway since 1982, financial documents and tax records. Then I packed Desmond and Celine's belongings carefully. Their clothes folded, not thrown, their books wrapped, their wedding photos cushioned with bubble wrap. 4 boxes each, labeled clearly, carried to the garage, with a typed note listing the storage unit address I'd rented and prepaid for 3 months. Because I wasn't cruel. I was protecting myself. Across the street, Lawrence Hampton stood on his porch watching. Our eyes met. I raised one hand. He nodded slowly, understanding, passing between 2 old men without words. 30 years as a cop had taught him to recognize the aftermath of something that couldn't be undone. I sat at the kitchen table one last time. The same table where Ruth had served breakfast for 43 years, where Desmond had done homework, where we'd celebrated birthdays and ordinary Tuesdays that felt like nothing special until they were gone. I sat at that table where Ruth and I had shared 10,000 mornings and wrote the hardest letter a father can write, the one that says, "I love you, and I will not let you destroy me." I wrote by hand on plain white paper. "Desmond, I have known everything since the 4th month, since the bank first called. The house has been legally sold. Your belongings are in storage, 3 months paid address in the garage. The FBI is investigating federal crimes, not out of vengeance, but to protect other seniors who might face what you tried to do to me. I remain your father. That will never change. But love does not mean staying silent in the face of wrongdoing. Databukiyad Addis." I folded it into an envelope, wrote his name on the front, and taped it to the front door. Dale Preston. The locksmith arrived at 4 p.m. with his toolbox and asked no questions. When I told him I needed every lock on the house changed within the hour, he worked efficiently, installing new deadbolts, new doorknobs, handing me the only set of keys. "New owners take possession Friday," I said. He nodded. "Good luck to you, sir." I walked to my truck, loaded the last box, sat behind the wheel, and looked at the house one final time. Then I drove toward Lake Norman as the sun set behind me, turning the sky orange and pink the way Ruth always loved. Behind me, the house on Elmwood Drive stood quiet in the fading light, waiting for Griffin and Alara and their baby daughter. Ahead lay the lake, and an apartment with a view I'd chosen myself, arranged by no one else, paid for with money my son would never touch. Desmond and Selene would return to Charlotte in 3 days, smiling and relaxed, from their conference with absolutely no idea what was waiting for them. Lawrence Hampton called me Sunday evening at 8:15 and told me my son's key wouldn't turn in the lock, and that's when I knew it was finally over. I'd been sitting on my Lake Norman balcony watching boats return to dock. Ruth's photograph on the table beside me when my phone rang. Lawrence's voice was quiet, measured the way cops learn to deliver facts without emotion. "Vernon," he said, "your son just pulled up to the house. His key won't work." The new owner answered the door. I closed my eyes and listened to the lake water lapping against the shore below. "Thank you for calling, Lawrence. He's reading something now. Letter looks like. Taped to the door." "I know." A pause. "You did what you had to do." "Yes," I said. "I did." Lawrence told me the rest later when we met for coffee 3 days afterward. But that Sunday evening, sitting on my balcony in the last light of day, I already knew exactly what was happening 40 miles away on Elmwood Drive. Desmond and Celine had arrived home around 6 p.m., relaxed and smiling after 5 days in Atlanta. Conference materials in Celine's arms, Desmond's key ready in his hand as he walked up the porch steps to the house where he'd grown up. The house he'd planned to steal, the house that was already gone. The key slid into the lock but wouldn't turn. He tried again, jiggled it, pulled it out, examined it, tried a third time. "The lock's jammed or something," he called to Celine. "My key won't work." The door opened from inside. Ilara Ashford stood there 7 months pregnant, one hand resting on her round belly, looking at them with gentle confusion. "Can I help you?" she asked. Desmond froze. "This is my father's house." Ilara's expression shifted to understanding, then sympathy. "No," she said softly. "We bought this house last week." Lawrence said Desmond's face went completely blank, like someone had erased everything behind his eyes. Then Desmond saw the envelope taped beside the doorframe. His name written in handwriting he'd known his entire life. Birthday cards, school permission slips, checks for college textbooks. His father's careful, precise lettering. He tore it open, standing on the front lawn. Lawrence watched from across the street, hands in his pockets, saying nothing. 30 years as a cop had taught him when to observe and when to intervene. This moment required only observation. Desmond read, standing perfectly still. Halfway down the page, his hands started shaking. When he reached the paragraph mentioning the FBI, Celine snatched the letter from his hands. She read the words I'd written at the kitchen table Tuesday afternoon. "I have known everything since the 4th month, since the bank first called. The house has been legally sold. Your belongings are in storage, 3 months paid address in the garage. The FBI is investigating federal crimes. Not out of vengeance, but to protect other seniors who might face what you tried to do to me. I remain your father. That will never change. But love does not mean staying silent in the face of wrongdoing. Dad." Celine's legs gave out. She dropped straight down onto the porch steps like someone had cut her strings. Desmond stood frozen still, holding the letter, staring through the open door into the living room, where Lawrence could just make out shapes moving beyond the threshold. New furniture, a life already replacing his. Strangers' lives filling the space where his had been. Lawrence said watching my son realize what I had done was like watching a man fall through ice that moment, when they understand the solid ground they thought they stood on never existed at all. "He just stood there, Vernon," Lawrence told me later over coffee. "Nearly 30 minutes without moving, like he couldn't understand how you'd stayed a step ahead the entire time. I've seen men realize they're caught before," Lawrence said. "Your son looked exactly like that." Eventually, Ilara came back to the door, apologetic and uncomfortable. "I'm sorry," she said. "I don't know what's happening, but this is our house now." She closed the door gently. Desmond and Celine drove to the nearest motel and checked in with cash. Adrian learned that much from her contact at the field office, who'd had agents tracking Desmond's phone location since the case file opened that morning. Tuesday morning at 9 a.m., 2 FBI special agents knocked on their motel room door. Adrian walked me through it that evening over the phone, reading from the agent's own summary. Special Agent Michael Brennan of the FBI Charlotte Field Office introduced himself at the motel door with the practiced calm of someone who delivered bad news to criminals 1,000 times before. Special Agent Sarah Caldwell stood beside Brennan Badge, visible face professionally neutral, as she explained the federal charges Desmond and Celine were facing. "Mr. Garrett, Miss Garrett, you're both under federal investigation for identity theft and bank fraud," Brennan said, according to the summary. "We'd like you to come to our field office Thursday morning for questioning. Voluntary but refusal will result in a grand jury subpoena." Desmond's hands shook as he reached for his phone. "I need to call a lawyer." That's your right, Caldwell said. Thursday 9 a.m. We'll expect you both. They left. The door closed. Celine sat on the edge of the motel bed, staring at the wall, silent, or so Adrian's contact described it. That same Tuesday, Celine's bank received formal FBI notification that an employee was under investigation for illegally accessing customer data in violation of the Gramm-Leach-Bliley Act. The bank suspended her immediately. 8 years of employment ended in a single phone call. The 2 fraudulent loans were frozen by federal order, classified as identity theft, protecting me from any financial liability. Desmond called my number 14 times that day. I answered exactly 0. The first call came at 10 a.m. Dad, please, we need to talk. Call me back. The 7th call at 3 p.m. voice breaking. Dad, I know I messed up. Please just talk to me. The 14th call at 9 p.m. Dad. Please. 14 calls. 14 chances for me to feel guilty, to second guess, to soften. I deleted every voicemail without listening. Not out of cruelty. Out of survival. That Tuesday evening I sat on my Lake Norman balcony, watching the water turn from gold to purple in the dusk. Her picture rested on the table beside me. My phone showed 14 missed calls. I didn't need to answer Desmond. Didn't need to do anything more. The FBI had their evidence. The house was sold. The money was safe. Justice was operating exactly as designed. I lifted my coffee cup and watched boats drift across darkening water, and I felt peace I hadn't felt in 6 months. The wheels of justice were turning without me now, and 1 week later, my phone would ring one final time, and that time I would answer. 1 week later, my phone rang for the 15th time with my son's number, and I looked at Ruth's photograph and decided that this time, finally, I would answer. I'd been sitting on my Lake Norman balcony watching dusk settle over the water, Ruth's face smiling at me from the framed photo on the table. The week had been quiet, peaceful in a way I hadn't experienced since before Desmond moved in last October. 14 calls I'd ignored, 14 voicemails I'd deleted without listening. But this 15th call, something felt different. Maybe it was the way the light hit her picture frame. Maybe it was simply time. I pressed the green button, said nothing, just waited. Silence stretched between us. I could hear him breathing on the other end, hear traffic in the background, hear him trying to find words. Dad, his voice came up barely above a whisper. When did you find out? I watched a boat drift across the darkening lake, its navigation lights blinking red and green. Month 4 of living under my roof, I said quietly. When the bank called about the first loan, another silence heavier than the first. I heard him take a shaking breath. I'm sorry, he said, and his voice cracked on the second word. I'm so sorry. I didn't respond immediately. Let the words hang there between us, inadequate words, trying to carry the weight of 6 months of betrayal. How much did you owe Desmond? I asked. Tell me the truth. A long pause. Somewhere on his end, a car horn honked. 180,000, he said finally. A real estate investment 2 years ago? It failed. The interest just kept climbing every month. I was drowning Dad. I didn't know what else to do. So you decided to drown me instead. I thought... He stopped. Started again. Celine said we could make it look like your decision, that you'd never have to know it was us, that you'd sell the house we'd pay off the debt, and you'd just think it was your idea. And the money left over, we were going to split it, use it to start over in Atlanta. I closed my eyes, heard the truth I'd already known but never heard spoken aloud. My son had calculated exactly how to steal from me, how to manipulate me, how to take everything Ruth and I had built and call it helping. Hearing my son confess why he'd tried to destroy me, I felt something I didn't expect. Not forgiveness exactly, but understanding that people you love can hurt you terribly and still be people you love. The FBI came Tuesday, Desmond said. They want us at the field office for questioning. Celine lost her job. The bank suspended her the same day. I know. You knew they'd do that. Adrienne explained what would happen, step by step. Adrienne Mercer, your estate lawyer. She became more than that when I needed her to be. Another long silence. I heard Desmond crying, quietly trying to muffle it, failing. I don't know what to do, Dad. I spoke slowly, then choosing each word carefully, laying bricks in a wall that would stand forever. You should hire a good lawyer, Desmond, the best one you can find. I can't help you with that. I won't help you with that. I paused, watching stars begin to appear above the lake. I am still your father, I said. That will never change. I heard him exhale relief or grief, I couldn't tell. But that house, I continued, I built it for your mother. We filled it with 43 years of our lives. No one had the right to take it away from us. Not even you. I know, he whispered. I know that now. Do you? Yes, I hope so. The line went quiet except for breathing his ragged mind steady. I loved Mom too, Desmond said finally. I know you don't believe that right now, but I did. I do. Then you understand why I couldn't let you take the house. Yes. I looked at Ruth's photograph at her smile that had carried me through the worst year of my life, and then through 6 months of discovering my son was stealing from me. Goodbye, Desmond. Dad, wait. I've said what I needed to say. I hung up gently. No anger, no door slam. Just a quiet click. I set the phone beside Ruth's photograph on the balcony table. The lake had turned from gold to deep purple, the last light fading from the sky. I lifted my coffee cup gone cold an hour ago and took a sip anyway. Then I picked up Ruth's photograph and held it close enough to see her face clearly in the dimming light. I kept it, Ruth, I whispered. I kept our home. The photograph didn't answer, but I felt her presence anyway, the way I'd felt it standing in the kitchen writing that letter, the way I'd felt it signing the closing documents, the way I'd felt it every moment of the last 6 months, when I'd needed to be stronger than I thought I could be. You were right about patience, I told her, about doing things the right way. I wish you could see this lake. You would have loved it here. I set the photograph back on the table and sat back in my chair. Darkness settled over the water, now complete and quiet. I heard the gentle lapping of waves against the shore below a distant boat, motor night birds beginning their songs. If you've never had to choose between protecting yourself and protecting someone who tried to take everything from you, you can't know how much it costs to do both at the same time. But sitting there in the darkness, listening to the lake, I knew I'd made the right choices. All of them. From that first phone call in February to this final conversation tonight, I thought about 32 years building a business, learning to read people, learning when to speak and when to stay silent, learning when to trust and when to verify, learning that calm wasn't weakness. It was knowing exactly when the time for action arrived and when the time arrived for simply sitting down and watching the dust settle. Ruth had taught me patience. The last 6 months taught me what that patience was for. Some people remain calm not because they don't feel anything, but because they know exactly when it's time to act and when to simply sit down, watch the lake, and let the dust settle. I sat there in the darkness for a long time listening to the water lap against the shore, feeling the cool April breeze on my face, holding the memory of my wife close, and the knowledge that I'd protected what we built together. For the first time in 6 months, I felt completely at peace. And to you, listening to my story, remember this. Protecting yourself doesn't make you cruel. It makes you wise. If I could go back, I wish I'd seen the signs earlier. I trusted too completely, loved too blindly. But maybe that's not a mistake. Maybe that's just what fathers do. The real lesson I learned was that love and boundaries aren't enemies. They're partners. Don't make my mistake of thinking you have to choose between protecting yourself and loving someone. You can do both. Being a revenge dad wasn't about anger. It was about dignity. Family justice doesn't mean destroying the people who hurt you. It means refusing to let them destroy you. I believe God put me through this to teach me that patience isn't weakness. It's strategy. Every revenge dad story teaches something different. Mine taught me that sometimes the strongest love looks like a closed door and changed locks. Family justice starts when you decide your peace matters as much as their comfort. That's part of why I'm sharing this with you now, so other families can see the warning signs I missed. If this story resonated with you, I'd be honored. If you'd leave a comment, did I do the right thing or did I go too far? Share this with someone who needs to hear it. And if you want more stories about standing up for yourself with dignity, please subscribe to Silent Dad Revenge. Your support means everything to me. Thank you for staying until the very end. It means more than you know. One final note. While the core message of this story is real, some details have been fictionalized for storytelling and reflection. What matters is the lesson, and I hope it stays with you.